Good morning. Welcome to the Dive Lab Coffee Chat. I am Diver Dave, and we are in the Dive Lab. And of course, it's morning, so I've got coffee. And today's topic, we're going to retry this as we had some issues again last night, is all about self-reliant diving. So that's a good one. It's one of my most fun topics to talk about. When I took the self-reliant diver course way back on the recreational side, it was the one that I had enjoyed the most. So I'm looking forward to getting into it. I'll take a little bit of time to talk about 613 Dive. 613 Dive is a private PADI instructor business here in Ottawa, Ontario, in Canada. And I do most of my teaching probably about an hour away in Brockville, Ontario. We have lots of dive sites in the St. Lawrence River. The St. Lawrence River is an amazing playground for divers. And, for me, this is where I've done the majority of my diving. So if you don't know what the St. Lawrence River is, take a moment, look it up. It is a real blessing to have in terms of a diving playground. Right now, unfortunately, there is not a whole lot of diving going on because it's cold. And there's a lot of snow, and everything for the most part is iced over. So this is kind of the perfect opportunity in the dive season to start to work on all of the gear, the tank VIPs, any of the maintenance, rebreather overhauls, you name it. This is probably the best time to do it because in about another month or two, things are going to start to ramp up in terms of the actual diving. So this is now the time to basically do the maintenance. Hopefully, because weather is starting to get better, the ice will soon leave, and that means the dive spots will become open, and it'll be back to some cold water diving, for me at least, and some practice sessions, and then we'll start to sort of get closer to the start of the real dive season for most of the folks around here. But for those who have not been or dove in the St. Lawrence River and have an opportunity to dive in it in the summertime, I would say take advantage of it. It's actually a pretty cool experience. We have a lot of wrecks and a lot of stuff to sort of see. So, highly encourage you to give it a try. Facebook group. Let's talk about the Facebook group. The Facebook group membership keeps growing. I think we have over 770 members now, so that's pretty cool. I've been asked a couple times, where did the Facebook group and 613 Dive start? And actually started with the Facebook group in 2019 when I did my open water confined pool portion of the course. We had a couple of our buddies who, met each other during the course. And I said, hey, I'll spin up a Facebook group so that we could kind of stay in touch and organize and plan dives. Ironically, no one actually ever did that. And I've never sort of dove with anyone except one person, which was a few years later. So I don't know if they're still diving, but maybe they just didn't tell me. But the Facebook group kind of sat dormant for a while until I started to sort of spread it around and meet folks in the diving community. Then it kind of just slowly grew. The one thing I've always felt is I would love to see more folks post in the Facebook group about their diving experiences. It seems like it's always me posting a lot, but just recently I thought it was actually pretty nice. I saw a couple of videos posted from Stephen Hall and Mark and Mel. Sounds like you guys were in the Bahamas doing some really nice diving, and appreciate watching the videos. It was actually pretty cool for me to see because for those that don't know, I'm actually from Freeport, Grand Bahama Island. This is where I spent most of my young adult time from the age of, I think, 2 to 18. So while I never scuba dived back home, I did a lot of free diving and a lot of spearfishing with my dad. So it was really fun to watch the videos. The visibility looked great. It looked like you had a fair bit of marine life. And so it's always something I've thought about is do I take, some of my scuba stuff down there back home and go diving? So appreciate those videos. And it was really nice to see others posting in the Facebook channel. So yes, that's pretty cool. The YouTube channel. The YouTube channel continues to be a learning process. But the good news is we hit 100 subscribers. And, I spun this thing up in mid-January is when I posted the first Dude in a Box episode. And we have 107 subscribers this morning. So that's pretty cool. My goal was 100, and you know what? We got past it. So now we just keep moving. I've kind of enjoyed the experience. It's been a lot of work trying to figure out how to navigate all of the YouTube sort of setup and configuration and how you optimize, and we're still working on that for sure. But it has been a fun journey. and it seemed like it was stuck at 99 subscribers for quite a while. It was actually pretty comical here in the house as the family would come in the morning and take a look in the office and see, hey, what's the count up today? So at least we've got past our goal, and let's see where we can take it. But it is pretty cool, and I wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone who has taken the time to watch, like, and of course, hit the subscribe button. So that is much appreciated. From a setup perspective on the live broadcast, because I'm still figuring this out, by the way, you know, I have a laptop here on my left that is running all of the studio portion of the live broadcast. And then up top, right above the camera, I have an agenda with a bit of a cheat sheet on all the stuff I'd like to talk about today. So 613 Dive training update. I actually have a gas blending course coming up. I'm going to learn to gas blend on the nitrox side. So it means I can do my own deco mixes and my own nitrox blends. I'll be taking that with Canada Diving Supply. Shout out to Mr. Jeff. Sounds like it's this Sunday. So that's going to be a full day of learning how to gas blend. And even better is, sounds like I get to do it with an old dive buddy of mine. So, Mr. Chris, looking forward to working with you and teaming up with you once again. The gas blending course has always been something that I've wanted to do, and Reese gave it to me as a Christmas gift this Christmas. So, thank you for that. I appreciate it, and looking forward to getting that certification done and being able to do my own gas blends. And then, from a training perspective, on the 15th of March, that weekend, I am back in the pool doing an open water course for a father-daughter team, Jens and Matilda. Looking forward to that. I'm going to be checking on the e-learning this week to see if you guys are staying ahead of the game there, because we got to get that done. So, but looking forward to working with both of you. And we always want to try to throw in a little bit of a dive safety sort of clip or chapter in these live broadcasts. And today I found a really cool video that I actually posted on the 613 Dive Facebook group. And by the way, if you're not a member of the 613 Dive Facebook, you don't have to be a local diver. Anyone can join. Just head on over to Facebook, look up 613 Dive Facebook group, and throw in a membership request, and I'd be happy to take a look and approve it. But I did post this in the 613 Dive Facebook group because I thought it was a really, really good video from Dan in terms of ear and barotrauma and all of the physics, what that happens around the ear as we start to descend in the water. So I'm going to put that one on the screen. It's just a 2-minute video. I would really encourage you guys to, sip your coffee and take a look and watch it. I thought it was one of the best videos that I've seen to date in terms of explaining how this all works. And we'll go from there. So just give me 1 sec. We'll get that going. All right, so let's give this a try. We're still working through the technology of screen sharing and being on screen at the same time, but I think we've got it going.
If you fail to equalize, here's what happens. When you're just 3 feet, or roughly 1 meter below the surface, the water pressure against the outside of your eardrums is about 10% more than the surface air pressure in your middle ears. Your eardrums start to flex inward, reducing the volume of the cavity and effectively equalizing the pressure. You may sense this as a slight feeling of pressure in your ears. At 6 feet, or roughly 2 meters, the pressure differential rises to 20% more than at sea level, and your eardrums bulge further into your middle ears to compensate. The nerve endings in your eardrums become stretched. You feel definite pressure, and most people start to feel pain as well. Beyond 6 feet, or roughly 2 meters, your eardrums become stretched to their limit. At this stage, unless you have equalized during your initial descent, almost everyone feels significant discomfort and/or pain. The tissues in your middle ears may start to tear, and small blood vessels may start to break, causing internal bruising that can last up to 3 weeks. As the pressure differential builds, your eustachian tubes shut, making equalization impossible, and your pain increases. At 10 feet, or 3 meters, if your eardrums haven't broken yet, The pressure differential draws fluid from surrounding tissues and blood from broken capillaries into your middle ears. This is called middle ear barotrauma. Fluid, not air, now equalizes the pressure on your eardrums. The acute pain may subside a little and be replaced by a feeling of fullness in your ears, which will likely remain for a week or more until the fluid is reabsorbed by your body. If you descend beyond 10 feet or 3 meters without equalizing, your eardrums can break, causing water to flood your middle ears. The sudden exposure of the middle and inner ear to cold can affect the balance mechanisms in your vestibular canals, causing sudden vertigo. Of course, if you equalize frequently by letting in air through your eustachian tubes, there will be no pressure difference, no stress to your ears, and no symptoms of barotrauma.
All right. I mean, that is a excellent video. Probably the best I've seen in terms of quickly explaining the effects of pressure as we descend down in the water. And it's something that I'm actually going to start to show all of my open water students, that video, because Dan did a hell of a job there. So good shout out to Dan. I know we always talk about equalization. We always talk about equalizing often, but that video right there does such a really good job of explaining it. So great video. Wanted to share it to the group and also on this podcast. And we'll continue to find different things to share in terms of dive safety as we progress through these live podcasts. All right, so let's take a moment and we're going to talk about the main topic of the podcast today, and that is being a self-reliant diver. This one is really important to me because it is the course out of all the recreational courses that I took that kind of resonated with me the most. Because a self-reliant diver means you are now carrying all of the redundant gear you need, as well as the knowledge, the understanding, and the approach to being a self-reliant diver and sort of getting yourself out of an emergency situation on your own if your buddy was not available to help. And I always kind of, when I teach this course to students, I talk about an analogy of two hikers hiking in the woods or up the mountains. And scenario one, they have one backpack, which they kind of alternate back and forth to share the load. And of course, in the backpack, they have all of the essentials to carry out that hike safely. They have water, they have a map, they have a compass, they have GPS, they have a first aid kit, whatever it takes to sort of carry out that hike safely. And then something happens, the two hikers get separated, the bad weather comes in, and now you have a situation where one of the hikers, of course, has everything that they need to sort of exit that hike safely, but the other hiker is now in a little bit of a critical situation in terms of trying to figure out how to exit that hike. They don't really have the essentials, and it could be a bit of a situation that could escalate quickly. So scenario number two is now the flip to that. You have the same two hikers, the same hike, but they both have backpacks. And in those backpacks, they both have the essentials they needed. Like we said, the compass, the cell phone, the map, the water, the first aid kit, all of the things it takes. And so now the weather rolls in, they get separated. But the good news is each of them have what they need in order to exit that hike safely. And if now you compare that to a dive and a buddy team, it's the same concept. I've always said, if you have two self-reliant buddies who have all of the redundant gear necessary to get and handle a situation on their own, now you have a very strong buddy team because they're both thinking in the self-reliant way. So that's really what it means to be a self-reliant diver. I always tell people self-reliant diving does not mean solo. But it could mean solo if that's what you're interested in. But it doesn't have to mean solo. It's really more about equipping each of the divers in the buddy team with the right amount of gear, the mindset, and the knowledge to make sure that they are now a very strong buddy team. And if you think about it, you might have a buddy who's a photographer. Well, probably during the course of that dive, your buddy is not checking on you a whole lot. So do you have enough gear with you and knowledge and training to handle a situation if he did or she didn't notice you were in a sort of out of air emergency or whatever the emergency was? So that would be sort of one of the areas that I would want to push. Now, while it doesn't mean solo, if you are self-certified, self-reliant certified, it does mean that you can go to the practice spot and go get a dive in or two and start to work through core skills. You don't actually have to have a buddy if you're comfortable enough to go there on your own. It's a practice spot. It's 20, 30 feet of water. And now you actually are, you don't have to actually set up the time and schedule it all. Now you can just go there and work on the skills on your own. So it could mean solo if that's what you're comfortable doing. So what are the PADI requirements for the self-reliant course? Well, you have to have at least 100 dives under your belt, right? And we all know not every dive is the same, but 100 dives minimum is the course requirement. And it's the right mindset. I always, when I have a self-reliant student sort of inquiring about a self-reliant course, I always talk to them about their mindset, their approach, and then we do a quick assessment dive. It might be we're at the local dive spot going through a quick dive, looking at skills. I always want to make sure that their core skills, the buoyancy, the fin control, and the trim is all in place before we consider adding in a self-reliant portion to their diving experience. So if we can get through that, then it's a 100 dive minimum. And then we have to talk about the gear. The gear is probably the disadvantage of trying to be or learning to be a self-reliant diver because it costs more. So you have to have a spare mask, but I would argue that every recreational diver should have a spare mask. We talked about that in the last episode, but if you're just a spare mask away from really avoiding a critical incident underwater with your buddy, why wouldn't you just carry a spare mask at all times, even if you're not a self-reliant diver? But you have to have a spare mask. From a computer perspective, you have to have 2 dive computers, or at least a dive computer and a bottom timer. But most days, or these days, it's going to be 2 dive computers. But hey, great opportunity to upgrade your existing computer and then use your existing one as the backup. And then we have to talk about, you're going to need a backup compass. You're going to need a DSMB, a signaling device, and then, of course, a redundant gas source, which we like to call a pony tank. And the pony tank typically is a 40 cubic foot aluminum cylinder, and I have one here that I'll show you guys in a sec. And the good news is, when you have 40 cubic feet with you of extra gas that is only to be used as an emergency, that now really starts to build up your confidence as a self-reliant diver. The other important piece of the self-reliant course is we teach you how to gas plan. And it's not just the rule of thirds anymore. Now you start to understand things like, what is your sac rate? What is your surface air consumption? Which means, how many cubic feet of gas per minute are you breathing? If you know that, and you know your depth and the time, you can actually calculate quite accurately how much gas you're going to consume during the course of that dive. And then, of course, you can take that math and add some conservatism to it to make sure that you have enough gas with you in terms of if you had a critical event. So, self-reliant diver, it's all about a new understanding of gas math, gas planning, of course, redundant gear, and then, of course, learning how to be a self-reliant diver. So I have a pony tank right here, and I'm going to bring it up on the screen with let's see if we can get the cell phone cam working. So give me 1 sec to get that up and running. And then we can go over quickly the pony tank setup. One of the biggest things that I struggle with students or folks who have pony tanks is they don't take the time to properly rig a pony tank. There we go. Let's see if we can get that going. And so what happens is their rigging allows their pony tank to really sit quite below them. And as they're diving, it's kind of swinging as a pendulum back and forth. It might be hitting their legs. It might be all over the place. And it's just not a comfortable experience in terms of diving with a pony tank. And so a lot of folks give up because it just doesn't feel right. And it's kind of uncomfortable and it's kind of frustrating. So today I'm just going to quickly show you how I rig my pony tanks to make sure that we kind of pull the pony tank nice and tight underneath the left armpit. And then that way it just becomes part of my dive kit and isn't really swinging around a whole lot to sort of frustrate me. So let's get this switched over. And it looks like we're working. So as you can see, we have lots of tanks down there. I've got to start my tank VIPs, but let's get the pony tank up here. All right, so this is my 40 cubic foot pony tank. And I just want to talk about the rigging today. So you can see that the bottom mount is a single ender, which has enough space for my dry glove fingers to get through. And I always like to keep this space between the band and the single ender very short. I mean, I need enough room for it to flex and be able to actually clip it into my lower D-ring sort of clip. But I don't want this piece way too long so that now my pony tank has a ton of room to swing when I'm diving. So I like to keep that nice and clean and nice and tight against the band. And then if we take a look up top, this is really where it helps, because now I have the same single ender, but I also have a bungee, all right, which actually pulls. If you look, it has nice tension. And so as this clips into the upper D-ring, that bungee keeps the pony tank nice and tight against my chest. And so for me, it creates a pony tank that actually will just sit underneath my left arm and does not move a ton. So that becomes just part of the diving kit. And honestly, after a while, I don't even notice it. So that's a pretty quick example of how I'm rigging up the pony tank. I learned the little bungee trick at the neck of the pony tank from the Wizard. So shout out to Mr. Steph Stanical. I kind of stole that from you as I was diving with you one day, and I was like, I don't understand how he has the pony tank. It doesn't seem to move. And then I took a look at the setup after our dive, and there it was. It sort of allowed me to see that little trick, which obviously is a very cheap trick, to keep that pony tank nice and tight underneath. So shout out to you on that trick, buddy. I appreciate it. And by the way, I'm now passing that down to everyone I'm teaching on the self-reliant diving, so that's kind of cool. The pony tank itself is only to be used in an emergency situation. You don't use it to extend the dive. You don't use it only for the fact that if you needed emergency air, that is your emergency air. If your buddy needed emergency air, you could now give them that 40 cubic foot pony tank and sort of now start to plan your ascent. If you have a buddy that you're diving with often, part of your practice skills should be being able to back and forth swap that pony tank in an emergency situation. So if you're going for a practice dive in a shallow area, I would say take a minute and take pony tank. Take the pony tank and start to practice passing it back and forth, keeping your buoyancy. Can you clip it in? Can you take it off? Can you put it back on? Sort of that scenario. That would be a good thing to practice if you had a dive buddy who was diving with you a lot. Now, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk about the size of the pony tank, because that's a 40 cubic foot pony tank, which means I have 40 cubic feet of air. If you do the gas math, some quick gas math, and let's just say you had a sac rate of 1 cubic foot a minute, which is a little on the high side for sure. But let's just go with that for now because it makes the math easy. If I'm at 100 feet and I'm breathing a cubic foot a minute at the surface, it means I'm actually breathing 4 cubic feet at 100 feet because it's 4 times. That means that 40 cubic foot tank would last 10 minutes. So we don't have a ton of time at 100 feet in an emergency air situation on the pony tank. It is really used to sort of get us and allow us to do our ascent safely and then finish up with our safety stop. But the question I would have is, I've seen folks carrying these little tiny spare air cylinders with them, and I don't really know what the size is. Maybe someone can put a comment there and let me know. But I mean, they've got to be, I don't know, 2, 3 cubic foot cylinders at the most. I'm not too sure, but at 100 feet, they are not really providing maybe a breath or two. That's it. So I'm not too sure, really what the value is of taking them with. I guess it's better than no air, but boy, you're not getting a ton. I always like to teach the 40 cubic foot pony tank is the minimum that you should get comfortable with. Some folks in the beginning kind of struggle because they think, oh, it's another tank I've got to clip on, and now it's a bit of a pain to carry. If you just put the time into it and just dive with it all the time, after about the fifth dive, honestly, that pony tank kind of just disappears into your dive setup and you don't even notice it. And even better, if you go and dive without it after a half of a season diving with it, you will actually feel like you do not want to dive without it, because now you've lost that extra sense, that extra layer of sort of dive security in terms of having that extra gas. And now back to the argument of two self-reliant divers in a buddy team. If you've got two self-reliant divers, they've both got spare masks, spare compasses, spare computers, they've got their DSMBs, and they've each got a pony tank. Well, now you've really got a strong buddy team that is going to be very capable of handling a lot of out of air or any sort of situation underwater together. And the other scenario where one of your buddies is a photographer and not really paying attention to you, well, now you have a little bit of latitude to say, okay, you know what? I have everything I need in case I had an out of air situation. So I'm not as stressed anymore, in terms of my buddy not checking in on me from time to time. So just something to keep in mind. And this is why I really, really enjoy the Self-Reliant course, and I really enjoy teaching it, because you can see the light bulbs turn on as the students progress through the course. I'm going to take a minute break, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. And of course, we're talking about being a self-reliant diver and all of the advantages. Let's take a minute to talk about some examples. So I was on a dive trip down south. I'm not going to mention the dive group or the dive shop, but I will say it was somewhere in the Caribbean. The water was pristine. Visibility is, I don't know, a long ways away. And what I noticed, and it was a big dive group, what I noticed was as the days progressed, you started the days off as the first few days, the buddy teams were like together. But as the confidence grew and we got more comfortable in the water, the visibility sort of allowed us to sort of separate as buddy groups. And by midweek, you could see buddy groups 100, 200 feet apart. Now, it didn't look that far apart because the visibility was so nice. I mean, if you did that here in the St. Lawrence in the middle of summer, well, after 20 feet, you don't see your buddy anymore. But down there, you're able to see your buddy from a long ways away. So it gives you that false sense of security that your buddy is close, when in actual fact, your buddy is about 200 feet away. And if you think about that, I was kind of drifting along and following the group. I could see this sort of pattern sort of trending as the days went by. And I tried to explain a couple times at the dinner sessions. It's like, you guys are drifting apart so far apart that you're actually further away than the surface is. So if your buddy is 100 or 200 feet away taking pictures of spotted eagle rays or a little fish or whatever it is, first of all, they're not paying attention to you. Second, they're actually 100 to 200 feet away. The surface, which is 60 feet, is actually closer. So then I'd make the argument in an out of air scenario, what's closer, your buddy or the surface? And I think the answer is pretty obvious. So in that scenario, I would say a self-reliant diver is a perfect example of why it would reduce the stress. So that would be one of the examples I saw. Visibility allows buddy teams to separate to a point where they're no longer really a buddy team. They're actually just two divers diving in the same ocean. The next example I'll give as my own example is we have a really nice shore dive. It's a bit of a technical dive from shore here in Rockport, Ontario, where it's about a 20-minute dive out to see a really, really cool wreck called the Kinghorn. And I was halfway out on the wreck, halfway out to going to see the wreck, and my mast strap broke. So we would have been at 70 feet, maybe 68 feet, and my mast strap broke. You know, suddenly that was an emergency situation. But luckily, I reached into my right pocket. At the time, I was wetsuit diving, and I had my pair of tech shorts on. Reached in, I grabbed my mask, I deployed my spare mask, cleared it, and then I found my original mask, or I guess now my backup mask with the broken strap, put it in the pocket, signaled my buddy, and we continued on the dive. So that's a great example of if I did not have this spare mask, and we talked about this in the previous video, what would that situation look like? How long would it take for that situation to potentially get out of hand? First of all, I would be on the bottom. It's a very silty bottom at 70 feet. I'd be trying to signal my buddy, and hopefully my buddy would see me. But if they didn't see me, then what? And even if they did see me, what does that scenario look like in terms of being able to safely ascend, do the safety stop, and you name it? So again, all of that can be avoided. Just have a spare mask, grab it, deploy it. Mask straps break. They don't break a lot, but it did happen to me, and it was nice to know that I had that spare mask. And then just as important, I was able to take that spare mask, keep the stress levels down, deploy it and clear it, and get back to diving. So that would be my own personal example of when that happened. It's only happened once. And the last example would be Reese. We worked and trained with my son Reese all last summer, and he's turned into a really, really good diver. And he progressed from single tank into my back mount doubles and dove those for most of the summer. We had a really fun dive at the end of last season where it's a large square. And if you haven't seen the father-son video, that kind of illustrates that dive. And we were diving with some other tech buddies of ours. And as we're going through the wreck at 60 feet, he signaled to me that he was going to go around and meet us at the front. Now, normally, there's no way in hell back in the day he would ever leave my sight. But I already knew, he's got all the training. He's done all the gas planning. He's got redundant doubles on his back. And he has a pony tank on his side. And he's capable of actually getting himself out of probably most situations in terms of out of air or whatever that scenario could be. And so the nice part is my stress levels remained down because I didn't have to worry because I knew he had everything he needed in order to take care of himself during that dive. And so the rest of us progressed through the front of the wreck. And as we came out the bow, he was right there signaling to me that he was good. And we finished the dive, and it was a great dive. But that for me was a really nice feeling to know that, okay, he's learned enough. He's now diving with the right kind of equipment that is going to allow him to take care of himself should something happen. So, a couple of good examples there. So, and that's basically what we have on the slate for today's podcast. We don't have anyone in the chat. It's early. We're still new at this. We're still learning the technology. We're still learning even how to sit in front of a camera live. It is a much different feeling being able to sit here, deliver content, but I don't have the luxury of the edit tool. So that one has been quite interesting. This has been a bit of a progression because first you learn to sit in front of the camera and then you go and edit the video, but you're nervous about that. And then you become okay with that. And now the next level is, of course, sitting in front of it live without the luxury of that edit tool. So I appreciate it. Be patient. We're going to get better at this. All that to say is, please, if you like the videos, if you like the content, hit the like button, throw me a few comments, hit the subscribe button. This is how the channel is going to grow. I'm always going to be looking for interesting things to talk about. Dive season's coming, and there is going to be a wealth of opportunities to make videos and talk about and deliver content. So really looking forward to doing that. I appreciate anyone who's going to take the time after the fact to watch this. I'm happy to hear from you. Please reach out if you have any questions or you have some things you'd like to talk about. Happy to talk about self-reliant diving if you need anything. And I have Stephen Allen, who said, I couldn't tell you were new at this. You were doing great. Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you, Stephen. Always great to see at least one person on the chat, especially at the end. We're gonna sign off on this one because it's actually time to go back to the real day job in about an hour. But I'm gonna leave with you guys with the message: practice hard and dive safe. Take care. Cheers.